All right, so I wanted to talk about Lingoda and the Super Sprint, right? An unbiased review. I went through the Super Sprint this summer, signed up for it in May. It actually started June 12th and ended August 11th. So it's 60 days, classes 7 days a week, and if an hour long for each class. And if you don't miss any classes, then you can get a refund. And basically, it's $400 a month for the Super Sprint with seven classes a week. And unfortunately for me, I missed a class on day 31. I had the time off by an hour. So when I tuned into the class, I thought I was tuning in 5 minutes early. There was actually only 5 minutes left in my class. So that ruined my day, but it did not detract from the value of the Lingoda program. So all the reviews you hear on YouTube, I watched a bunch of them before I signed up. They all give glowing reviews. They're all positive and stuff. You never hear anything negative about it. So I just wanted to give the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good is that when I started, I was at level A2, and in 6 weeks in, so there was still 2 weeks left in the sprint. 6 weeks in, I took the test again, and I scored a B1. So the way the levels work when it comes to languages, Spanish, if those of you that took swimming classes as a kid, you might remember they had levels like beginner, then you went to advanced beginner, then it was intermediate, swimmer, and then lifeguard. So the Spanish and the other languages are similar. They start with A1, which is beginner, A2, which is advanced beginner, then B1, which is like beginning intermediate, B2, which would be like an advanced intermediate, then C1 and C2, which are two different levels of fluency. So to go from A2 to B1 in only 6 weeks, is great. And I've got to give, Lingoda a lot of credit for that. Now, my background in Spanish, cuando era joven estudiaba español en la escuela, desde el octavo grado hasta la escuela secundaria y 4 semestres en la universidad. So I said that, when I was younger, I started taking Spanish in the 8th grade, stayed with it through high school, and even 2 years at college, at which point I stopped taking Spanish because I realized that, hey, this is garbage. It's not fulfilling, the goals that I have in mind for Spanish. I think when someone takes a language, you want to be able to understand what you hear and you want to be able to speak well. So unfortunately in school, el estilo tradicional no fueron clases de discutir, no fueron clases de conversación, fueron clases de escribir, de leer y la gramática, right? They were not any classes of conversation and discussion. They were classes that dealt with reading, writing, and grammar. So at that time I was in college, I was writing 20-page term papers in Spanish. Still couldn't understand what any native speakers were saying when they spoke to me. And basically hablaba como un niño de 2 años. I used to speak like a 2-year-old kid. So, not cool. So here we are, more than 40 years later. I started with Lingoda. Now, as far as like how to book classes and all that stuff, it's easy. We don't need to take any time talking about, stuff like that. You'll figure that out in 2 seconds when you go on the website. There is a curriculum which takes you from, beginner to advanced. Like I said, I was on the A2 level, and A2, there's actually 2 levels. It's A2.1 and A2.2 before you get to B1. And I was on A2.1 the whole time. And even being on A2.1, I still managed to score and qualify for the B1 level, at the end of 6 weeks. Now, one of my biggest criticisms of Lingoda is that for the most part, and again, I'm saying for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, the instructors do not make corrections when it comes to pronunciation, which, is a major flaw. One instructor even told me that, accent is not important. And nothing could be further from the truth, because at a certain point it becomes not just a matter of accent, but you're mispronouncing the words. So these are errors. So when it comes to developing your pronunciation, and really when it comes to learning any language, you have to take responsibility for your own development. The instructors are not responsible for your progress. You are responsible for your progress. So I understood that, and I kind of took the bull by the horn when it comes to pronunciation. It's funny, I remember when I was in 8th grade, my brother, who was 1 year older than me, he told me that one of my friends said, oh, when Kevin is in Spanish class, he tries to speak like a native Spanish speaker. He's like, duh. Yeah, isn't that the idea? I mean, I have 3 goals, when it comes to Spanish. Yo tengo 3 metas. Número 1, quiero hablar con fluidez. Número 2, quiero entender todo lo que escucho. Y número 3, no quiero sonar como un gringo cuando hablo español. So my 3 goals: I want to speak fluently, I want to understand everything that I hear, and I do not want to sound like a gringo when I'm speaking Spanish. That gringo accent, I mean, it's horrible. It just sounds terrible. So anyway, that's one of the flaws. You're going to have to take the bull by the horns when it comes to pronunciation. Some of the instructors are better than others. One of my pet peeves is when the instructors, deviate from the lesson plan. In order to get the most out of Lingoda, you have to prepare in advance for each class. And you have access to the lesson material in advance. So you can go over the lesson plan, you can go over all the questions that will be asked, and you can go over the vocabulary that will be included in that lesson. And I can tell, when students didn't prepare because they don't know some of the simple vocabulary that was right there in the in the stuff they gave you prior to class. But I always prepared, and typically took me an hour to prepare for class. So that was an hour of preparation each day, an hour in the class, and then I supplemented Lingoda. I supplemented with Pimsleur, with Netflix, and YouTube. All right, and then I also added a LingoPie, which is another application which we can talk about at some other point. So the instructors that I preferred are the instructors that stuck to the lesson plan, because for some reason some instructors would take it upon themselves to deviate from the lesson plan, and didn't appreciate that at all, because it defeated the purpose of my hour of preparation. And then there were the instructors that just had no energy. The monotones, the boring robot types. I didn't like that. I liked the instructors that were upbeat, positive, enthusiastic. And through the course of the sprint, I learned that for me, the accents that I understood best were Mexican, Venezuelan, and Colombian. So those are the instructors that I prefer, also from those 3 countries. What I developed over time is a list of my instructors, where I had it divided into 2 categories: yes and no. So no is the instructors I didn't want to take any more classes with them in the future. And yes, obviously the instructors that I had a good experience with, right, that I would take classes with again in the future. I only gave, at the end of each class, you have to give a review. Well, you don't have to, but you give a review on the teacher, on the session, and you give a review to the teacher, and you give a review to the administration. So I only gave 1 negative review the whole time that I was there. And that was with this instructor that not only deviated from the lesson plan, but there were 3 of us in the class, and he gave 1 girl, this is no exaggeration, more than 50% of the speaking time. I mean, it was just so offensive, disrespectful, and just ineffective from the teaching standpoint. So he definitely went on my list of no. So what happened is that a few weeks after that, I'd signed up for a class. You can sign up for your classes way far in advance if you want to. So I'd signed up for this one, about 2 weeks in advance. And the day before the class was supposed to start, they swapped out instructors, and they put Mr. Horrible in place of the scheduled instructor. So there was no way I was going to sit through a class with this guy again. So, I canceled the class the day of the lesson, or the day before, as soon as I saw his name attached. Actually, I think I canceled it. And I contacted Lingoda and told them, listen, this is the situation. I don't want to take a class with this guy. He's the only instructor here I've ever given a negative review to. And I want to have a credit so that, I can have a makeup class. So customer service, they wrote back to me like, oh yeah, sorry, we're for your bad experience. We can't do that. We'll talk to the instructor, this, that, and the third, and blah, 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 right? It's crazy. Now you have to understand a lot of their system as far as scheduling instructors, this, that, and the third, a lot of it is automated. So for somebody to have to step in and do something manually, right, that's a little extra, that requires a little extra effort. So I wrote back to them again and I said, listen, I suggest that you take this email and refer it to somebody with the authority to do the right thing, because that's all I'm asking for, to do the right thing. They require that you cancel your class within the first hour of scheduling, or at least a week in advance, right? Neither of which I could do in this situation because he came in at the last minute. Had I seen him there a week in advance, of course I would have canceled the class. So a couple of days later, somebody that had some common sense, went and go ahead and gave me the the class credit, which, like I said, that was the right thing to do. Okay, now here's another issue that I had with the school. So toward the end of my sprint, I signed up for 3 extra lessons. The way the course is paced, where you're taking one class every single day, right, it's hard to absorb and retain all of the information. At some point, you need to stop and review. So at the end of the sprint, that's what I intended to do. I wanted to take some time and go back over every single lesson and, make sure that I was absorbing things. You have to, learn the difference between ser and estar, desde hace, por y para, things like that. So I knew I didn't want to continue with, one single class every day. So what I did is I signed up for 3 extra classes. And at the end of my subscription, I went to book some of those classes, because they say if you book a class, you have, it's good for a whole year, right? So you have up to a whole year to take that class. So when I went to schedule the class, right, I had 3 class credits in there. When I went to schedule the class, it said, oh, you can't schedule a class because you're trying to book this class after your subscription is ended. And I'm like, so basically what you're telling me is that you cannot buy any extra classes unless you have an active subscription. So why wouldn't you say that somewhere on the website? Because it doesn't say that on the website, and no one would know that, So, I wrote to them again, and I'm like, listen, if that's the case, you should have said it on the website. I want to be able to take these classes. Once again, they did the right thing, and scheduled me, so I was able to take the 3 classes. So keep that in mind. Booking extra classes, not recommended unless your subscription is still active. So today is August 29th in 2023, and my sprint ended August 12th, August 11th actually, and then I took the 3 additional classes. And now what I'm doing, like I said, I'm going back and I'm reviewing all of the previous lessons. And I filled up 1 full spiral notebook and half of another one in the 2 months that I was there. So I feel like I don't even need a textbook. Like my own notes are my textbook now. So from here, I'm going to go back into Lingoda once I finish my review. But I'm also going to add Italki into the mix, because I want to start developing the vocabulary, the phrases, the conversational skills to discuss the things, all the activities in my life, right? The things that are important to me. I don't want to talk about, que tiempo hace hoy, right? What's the temperature today? Or, los colores, the colors, or the counting of the numbers and whatever, right? So, for example, one of the things that I do is work with trained working dogs, right? These 2 are Dutch Shepherds. If you're into dogs, my dog channel is On Point Dogs. You can check that out. There's a lot of good content there, and I'll be adding some new material very shortly. So I want to be able to talk about the dogs. I want to be able to talk about the aquarium I have in my house, 35-gallon fresh water. I want to be able to talk about bonsai. I'm a bonsai practitioner. I want to be able to talk about digital art. I do a lot of work with Photoshop and things like that. And so these things you know, I really can't express myself when it comes to these areas right now. So I'm working on that, and I'll be using italki to supplement my lessons with Lingoda. So I hear a lot of people on YouTube, they have been taking Spanish for, you know, a few days, maybe a week, and they're already signing up for live conversation classes with italki, which I would not recommend. That doesn't make sense. You're not going to get your bang for the buck. You're not going to get value out of that if you're, you know, a stark beginner. So if you're a stark beginner, I recommend that you go to SpanishDict.com. That's DICT.com, right? SpanishDict.com. They have some free lessons there, which are ideal for beginners to start with. Also, take Language Transfer, which is a YouTube channel. So start with those two things first if you're a beginner. And then after you complete all the lessons there on Language Transfer, which they're 90, I believe, then you can sign up for something like a Lingoda, which is you know, has a structured curriculum, which will take you from beginner to advanced. And then after that, whenever you feel ready to supplement that with italki, you know, then that's when it would make a lot more sense to do that, and you're going to get you know, more value out of it. So I had my first talk with italki a couple of weeks ago. I impressed myself with it because it was an hour-long conversation, just me and the instructor, and I was able to, you know, maintain the conversation for a full hour. But for the most part, again, it was small talk, and that's what I want to get away from. You know, I'm tired of the small talk, and I want to, you know, start having deeper conversations about things that are more meaningful to me. So, do I recommend Lingoda? Absolutely, I recommend it. But remember, your teachers are not responsible for your development. You are responsible for your development. Adios.